This program is rated PG. It contains themes and scenes which may not be suitable for very young audiences. Parental guidance is advised.
We're working to connect a region of over 600 cultural bridges between our lands.
Welcome to ASEAN In Focus. I'm Alma Angeles, and joining me today is our correspondent, our anchor from EBC Vietnam Bureau. Here's Charlene. Hello, Charlene.
Hello, Alma. Hello, everyone. This is Charlene Nevaha from your EBC Vietnam Bureau, bringing you the latest news in the dynamic ASEAN region.
On today's headlines, U.S. President Joe Biden called Monday on Myanmar's military to relinquish power immediately and ordered a review to consider reimposing sanctions lifted during the nation's transition to democracy.
Meanwhile, Brunei, the current chair of ASEAN, has called for dialogue among parties, reconciliation, and the return to normalcy after a military coup in Myanmar.
President Duterte on Monday night assured the public that the national government is trying its best to keep the Philippine economy afloat after it contracted by a record 9.5% in 2020.
And ASEAN launches regional campaigns on misleading advertisement and consumer redress.
Play an important.
First, the United States has officially ordered and condemned the military coup in Myanmar. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki told a briefing to reporters that the reversal of democratic progress in Myanmar will necessitate an immediate review of sanctions, laws, and authorities after U.S. President Joe Biden called on Myanmar's military to relinquish power immediately and ordered the review to consider reimposing sanctions lifted during the nation's transition to democracy. Let's listen in.
Well, I think that's why that was called out in the president's comments. As you know, we removed sanctions, the United States, I should say, removed sanctions on Burma over the past decade based on progress toward democracy. The reversal of that progress will necessitate an immediate review of our sanctions laws and authorities, followed by appropriate action. So,
the international community should come together in one voice to press the Burmese military to immediately relinquish power they have seized, President Biden said in a statement. He added the United States removed sanctions on Burma over the past decade based on progress towards democracy. He said, using Myanmar's former name, the reversal of that progress will necessitate an immediate review of our sanction laws and authorities, followed by appropriate action. The United States, he said, will stand up for democracy wherever it is under attack. The United States, he said, is taking note of those who stand with the people of Burma in this difficult hour, President Biden said in what was likely a veiled reference to China.
Phil Robertson from Human Rights Watch said the coup in Myanmar is, quote, our worst nightmare. He also said, and I quote, it's going to result in Myanmar becoming a pariah state. Let's listen in.
This is our worst nightmare. What we're seeing is the Burmese military destroying the democracy that has resulted in a landslide win for the NLD. I mean, it wasn't just a small win for the NLD. The 2020 election was a landslide. And overnight, the military has returned Burma to the pre-2010 situation of military governments. You know, it's going to result in Myanmar becoming a pariah state. The reality is that this is absolutely disastrous. It's possibly the worst possible thing that could happen to the country. Military decided that they were unhappy with the NLD being returned to power with an even bigger majority in the parliament, and they decided to do something about this. And the great fear now is, of course, all the people who spoke out against the military over the years during the democracy all have to go into hiding. They could be facing retaliation. We're very concerned that we're going to, again, return to the pre-2010 situation where, we were dealing with one of the worst rights-abusing governments in the region. It's outrageous. It's unacceptable. And the international community now has to act and hold Min Aung Hlaing and the top military commanders of Myanmar responsible. And they've realized that they have no way to win in this democratic game, so therefore they just tore up the rules and decided they're going to go back to what they preferred from the beginning, which is direct power using a completely bogus, fraudulent state of emergency declaration to say that we're going to hold power for a year. The decision to have a military coup this time shows again that while the people of Myanmar and the democracy of Myanmar has moved forward, the mentality of the Myanmar military is not. And it's very possible that we will see new flows of Myanmar refugees coming to Thailand to escape a widening crackdown.
Myanmar's November vote was only the second democratic election the country had since it emerged from the 49-year grip of military rule in 2011. The NLD swept the polls and was expecting to give the 75-year-old Suu Kyi a new 5-year term. The military has 4 weeks complained that the polls were riddled with irregularities and claimed to have uncovered more than 10 million instances of voter fraud. It had demanded the government-run election commission release voter lists for cross-checking, which the commission did not do.
Meanwhile, Britain's government on Monday summoned Myanmar's ambassador in London over the coup by the country's military and the unlawful imprisonment of civilians, according to the Foreign Office. A ministry spokesperson said Myanmar Ambassador Kyaw Zwar Min had been summoned to the Foreign Office. The Minister for Asia, Nigel Adams, condemned the military coup and unlawful imprisonment of civilians, including Aung San Suu Kyi, Myanmar's leader. Adams called for assurance over the safety of those detained and for their immediate release, the statement added. And he called for Myanmar's National Assembly to be peacefully reconvened. Earlier Monday, Prime Minister Boris Johnson also posted on Twitter, quote, "I condemn the coup and unlawful imprisonment of civilians, including Aung San Suu Kyi in Myanmar." He said the vote of the people must be respected and civilian leaders released. The Elders, the group of former world leaders founded by Nelson Mandela in 2007, called on the international community to exert pressure for an immediate return to civilian rule in Myanmar.
A former UN rights investigator said Monday that Myanmar's military coup was an assault to democracy. Yang Hee Lee, a university professor in Seoul, who previously served as the United Nations Special Rapporteur on Human Rights in Myanmar, also said Myanmar's people will be forced to make huge sacrifices as a result of the military coup.
And it's an assault to democracy, the fragile democracy that Myanmar currently had. We were expecting Aung San Suu Kyi to move mountains and hills for democracy, but in fact she hasn't. And it was under her watch that more journalists were detained, more student activists were detained, more draconian laws were passed, and we saw a genocide occur in Rakhine. And not only, Min Aung Hlaing wanted to be the president so that he can stay in power. The reason he needs to stay in power is his family has so much at stake in businesses businesses run by the military or its cronies or its associates. The people have, I think they won a greater majority, the NLD did. And I think we have to respect and focus on the fact that the people voted for NLD. I'm not sure how much of that vote was towards Aung San Suu Kyi. And we have to, as I say, under her watch, so much atrocities happened. And so I think it's time for the international community to really rethink about how they will approach or address the situation in Myanmar and with whom they will be talking to.
Meanwhile, Aung San Suu Kyi had issued a preemptive call for people to reject any military takeover before she was detained on Monday, according to her party. According to a post on the official Facebook page of the chair of the National League for Democracy, she had called on people not to accept a coup. Myanmar's military has now put the country under a state of emergency for a year. The Facebook post noted the military's actions could jeopardize the country's efforts to fight a coronavirus outbreak. Myanmar has registered more than 140,000 cases and more than 3,000 deaths. The post said she had not accepted a controversial army-scripted 2008 constitution, but had abided by it since entering parliament. The constitution carved out a powerful ongoing political role for the military, giving them control of the key interior, border, and defense ministries and a block of parliamentary seats. Ms. Suu Kyi and her government had been trying to amend the charter since winning the 2015 election with little success. During the last term, she circumvented a constitutional clause that prevented her from assuming the presidency by taking the de facto leadership role of state councilor.
Professor of International Relations and expert in Southeast Asia, Jürgen Hack explains the crisis was brewing for numerous weeks after Myanmar's military seized power in a bloodless coup, detaining democratically elected leader Aung San Suu Kyi and imposing a one-year state of emergency.
The crisis was brewing for numerous weeks, ever since the elections took place in November of last year. And very soon after election day, obviously, there were critical remarks made about supposed irregularities, which the military did want to have addressed, but there weren't really. The military and Daw Suu really do their own thing, side by side, not really talking to one another, sort of embedded within a pretty serious power struggle that's always going on, really. And of course, it may also have to do with personalities here, where Daw Aung San Suu Kyi's style, may not be very appealing, to the military. It's a complex relationship, that Aung San Suu Kyi has with the military. I mean, obviously, you have to take this back a little. I mean, at one level, obviously, she's always been supportive of the military, given, that she's the daughter of her father, who was the founder of independence, and all of that. At the same time, of course, you're also aware that the military did detain her for long periods of time. This particular event obviously will see those that have always been supportive of democratization in Burma or Myanmar reach out, again, I think, to the NLD, and in some ways, whatever concerns they may have had about Daw Suu's position in relation to Rakhine State or certain other issues, I think these will now be basically pushed into the background somewhat. The immediate concern is obviously that whatever was achieved with the sort of political transition, even, transition that stalled, at some point. Whatever was achieved is clearly now, again, very much on the line. So it's quite natural, I would argue, for foreign governments who supported the process of political change in Burma, Myanmar over many years to feel upset, disappointed, and so on about what has taken place.
Meanwhile, Philippine presidential spokesman Harry Roque said the situation in Myanmar is an internal matter. He said the country's priority is the safety of its citizens in Myanmar. Let's listen in.
Well, siyempre po ang ating pangunahang interes ay yung kaligtasan ng ating mga mamamayan. Gumagalaw po ngayon nating embahada sa Myanmar para magbigay ng tulong sa lahat ng mga Pilipino. Kung gusto pong mga umuwi ng ilang mga Pilipino, gagawin po natin paraan na sila makauwi. Kung gusto po nilang temporary shelter dyan sa ating embassy, gahanap po tayo ng mga paraan. No? At pinag-iingat nga po natin ang lahat ng ating mga kababayan dyan sa Myanmar. Inaasahan po natin na sa lalong mabilis na panahon, sana po bumalik sa normal yan. Bagamat ang pangyayari po sa Myanmar ay isang bagay na internal at hindi po natin pinaghihimasukan. Ang importante po yung kaligtasan ng ating mga mamamayan dyan sa Myanmar.
Meanwhile, longtime Cambodian leader Hun Sen also referred to Myanmar's military coup as an internal affair of the country and declined further comment. Singapore's Ministry of Foreign Affairs expressed grave concern about the latest situation there, adding hopes that all parties would exercise restraint. Indonesia's foreign minister likewise expressed concern while also urging self-restraint. The Malaysian Ministry of Foreign Affairs in a statement said, quote, as a close neighbor and member of ASEAN, Malaysia continues to advocate for peace and stability, which are essential for progress and prosperity of all in this region, including in Myanmar.
About 24 riot police attempted to break up a protest in Bangkok, where scores of Myanmar migrant workers were demonstrating in front of their embassy and clashed with the Thai organizers of the protest who are part of the kingdom's own pro-democracy movement.
My whole family feel broken because Aung San Suu Kyi have been very good to our country. It's only have been 5 years and she will change so good and everything. We are going. Our city is become nice. Our country is becoming good, and Aung San Suu Kyi has been changed everything. And Aung San Suu Kyi is good. Aung San Suu Kyi is good for our country.
เรื่องประชาธิปไตยเป็นเรื่องของคนทั้งโลกเพราะฉะนั้นไม่ว่าเกิดรัฐประหารขึ้นที่ไหนไม่ว่าคุณจะเป็นชนชาติใดเราก็จะต้องช่วยกันต่อต้านประชาชนทั้งโลกต้องช่วยกันต่อต้านประเทศที่มีการรัฐประหาร
เวลานี้เดี๋ยวผมจะขออนุญาตเปิดเป็นเพลงรอให้ทุกคนเริ่มมาก่อน
Meanwhile, Rohingya Muslims who fled Myanmar for Bangladesh after a brutal military crackdown 3 years ago celebrated Aung San Suu Kyi's detention by the army on Monday. Around 740,000 Rohingya made the journey from Myanmar's Rakhine state into the neighboring country after operations in August 2017 that the United Nations has said could be genocide. Suu Kyi was the country's de facto leader at the time and defended the Myanmar military at an international criminal court hearing in 2019 into atrocities against the Rohingya, including rape and murder. Mao Kwao Min, the spokesman for the influential Rohingya Student Union, said there was now increased hope that Rohingya might return to their villages in Myanmar.
Meanwhile, Brunei, the current chair of ASEAN, has called for dialogue among parties, reconciliation, and the return to normalcy after a military coup in Myanmar. It said ASEAN member states have been closely following the current development in the Republic of the Union of Myanmar. We recall the purposes and the principles enshrined in the ASEAN Charter, including the adherence to the principles of democracy, the rule of law, and good governance, respect for and protection of human rights and fundamental freedoms. We reiterate that the political stability in ASEAN member states is essential to achieving a peaceful, stable, and prosperous ASEAN community. We encourage the pursuance of dialogue, reconciliation, and the return to normalcy in accordance with the will and interest of the people in Myanmar.
Meanwhile, the UN Human Rights Commissioner Michelle Bachelet is gravely concerned about the situation in Myanmar. That is according to her spokeswoman, Ravina Shamdasani. Take a look.
High Commissioner is gravely concerned about the situation in Myanmar following the removal of the civilian government and the arbitrary detention of dozens of political leaders, human rights defenders, journalists, activists, and others by the military. The High Commissioner is alarmed by reports suggesting that at least 45 people have been detained, including elected parliamentarians under confinement, and we call for their immediate release. The High Commissioner reminds the military leadership that Myanmar is bound by international human rights law, including to respect the right to peaceful assembly and to refrain from using unnecessary or excessive force.
The coup took place hours before the first session of the country's new parliament was set to convene following November's elections, in which the NLD made sweeping gains. The military claimed the coup was staged due to election fraud in the polls that it said resulted in the dominance of the NLD in parliament. UN spokesman Stefan Dujarric on Monday called the coup a serious blow to the democratic reforms.
Hundreds of Myanmar nationals in Japan protest outside the United Nations University in Tokyo to ask for help from the international community. The crowd is chanting slogans urging the immediate release of Aung San Suu Kyi.
とても皆さん悲しいですね。ずっと私たち軍事政権の下で50年以上ずっと行ったんだから、やっと民主化ができたと思ったら、今日ちょうど国会が開く1時間前にクーデターができたから、皆さん本当にがっかりして本当に大変悲しいです。
国連というのは世界の国が集まっているのでなんとかそういうミャンマーでの問題をなんとか解説をしてくれるかということを信じているのでこの前でもデモに参加しています。
Japan called Monday for Myanmar's military to release Aung San Suu Kyi and restore democracy, saying it was opposed to moves that pushed the country backwards. We request the release of stakeholders, including State Councillor Aung San Suu Kyi, who was detained today, Japan's foreign ministry said in a statement, urging the army to quickly restore the democratic political system in Myanmar. The ministry said Japan had been strongly supporting the democratic process in Myanmar and was opposed to moves going backwards. Japan has long had warm ties with Myanmar, offering considerable aid and private investment. Japan's foreign direct investment in Myanmar stood at $768 million in 2019 to 2020, and several prominent Japanese firms operate in the country. Tokyo has pressed Suu Kyi to tackle ethnic discrimination and violence, but humanitarian groups have also called Japan to take a more assertive role. Suu Kyi last visited Japan in 2019, while Japanese officials have made several high-profile trips to Myanmar in recent years.
ASEAN in Focus, we'll be right back. Stay tuned.
Events happen around us all the time, in our community, in our country, around the world. Events that affect people, move communities, or simply inspire us. Interesting events that people need to know. In these interesting times, we continue to be a competent partner in delivering news about these events. Fast, accurate, balanced, eagle news, because we live in interesting times.
Innovation, digital disruption, globalization. Startups, micro, small, and medium enterprises, as well as large corporations, all face interesting challenges in the market today. Peek into the world of exciting opportunities and partnerships to drive growth with the latest business news and information. We are open for business. Join the conversations to create a more vibrant environment for entrepreneurship. Catch Open for Business every Saturday from 5 to 6 p.m. Open for Business, from vision to action.
Malaysia will get its first batch of Pfizer's COVID-19 vaccines on this month, February 26. Here's Myrna Soriano joining us live from our EBC Malaysia Bureau. Hello, Myrna.
Hi, Alma. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Okay, for the latest news, on the 26th of February, the first batch of Pfizer's COVID-19 vaccine is expected to be received in Malaysia. Information is said to be coming from a senior health official on Monday, 1st of February, as reported by the national newswire Bernama. Back in November, a deal was announced that Malaysia had agreed to buy 12.8 million doses of vaccine, which were said to be jointly developed by the U.S. drug maker and German partners BioNTech. The deal has set Pfizer to deliver the first 1 million doses in the first quarter of 2021. Subsequent quarters will be with doses of 1.7 million, 5.8 million, and 4.3 million, according to the report of todayonline.com. The latter source has also reported that Malaysia has signed the second deal with Pfizer to secure an additional 12.2 million doses of their vaccine. Malaysia's Director General of Health, Nur Hisham Abdullah, was quoted by Bernama that national distribution will be over a period of 1 to 2 weeks once the vaccines are received. Meanwhile, the Malaysian government has announced that strict lockdown will not be imposed, as this would devastate lower income groups, according to the country's senior minister, Ismail Sabri Yaakob. Ismail said that this was specially for wage earners who would not have any income if they are prevented from working. He also recognized that though the current movement control order, MCO, is more relaxed as compared to the first, it is still causing significant damage to the country, according to the report of todayonline.com. The current MCO was imposed by the government on the 13th of January and later extended until 4th of February due to the rising cases of COVID-19 in the country. Ismail said during press conference, as we quote, as some say, we don't want people to die because of COVID-19, but we also don't want people to die because they have nothing to eat, end of quote. According to Bernama, COVID-19 cases of 4,214 has been recorded on the first day of February after 3 straight days of over 5,000 cases. Back to you, Alma.
All right. Thank you very much, Myrna, for your update there in Malaysia. Looking forward to more updates coming out of your country. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Reporting live from Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, this is Myrna Soriano. We'll live in interesting times.
President Rodrigo Duterte on Monday night assured the public that the national government is trying its best to keep the Philippine economy afloat after it contracted by a record 9.5% in 2020. In a pre-recorded public address, Duterte admitted that the country's economy is sinking deeper and deeper into recession and lockdowns caused by the prevailing coronavirus disease 2019 or COVID-19 pandemic, but noted that other countries are also experiencing the same financial crisis.
According to the Secretary of Finance, araw-araw ngayon hanggang matapos tong COVID, araw-araw we are losing 2 billion na pera para sana yun sa mga tao. The workers, the Filipino workers would have earned that money kung ang ekonomiya natin gumagalaw. Kaya nga hindi. Yung may social distancing, we cannot also argue with the science people. If they really mean good, so what can we do about it? So yung mga transportation, sabi ko, hindi yung social distancing, nakaka-discourage. So transportation business wala. And you know, the world and the economy is run by oil, gas. Kung hindi natin patakbuhin yung mga cargo trucks, mga ano dyan, wala na. So we are sinking deeper and deeper. Pero hindi lang rin tayo. O hindi tayo. Lahat. Pero we are trying our very best to keep us afloat. Ang ekonomiya natin, mga kababayan ko, is masama talaga. Biro mo naman, ilang taong walang trabaho. The economy of the Philippines is really in bad shape. But, as I have said, it is not only the Philippines who suffers. We in the world is suffering with everybody.
Presidential spokesperson Roque, however, expressed optimism about the country's recovery this year, saying the economic growth is projected to reach 6.5 to 7.5% in 2021 and 8 to 10% in 2022 if the reopening of the economy will be sustained. On January 28, the Philippine Statistics Authority said the local economy, as measured by its gross domestic product or GDP, sank by 9.5% in 2020, the nation's worst economic performance since after World War II.
And the presidential spokesperson, Harry Roque, also said that the Philippines is not lagging behind its Asian neighbors in terms of its coronavirus response and vaccine rollout. Now, in a palace press briefing, Secretary Roque made this remark after Vice President Leni Robredo said the government should not use its COVID-19 response as propaganda, but a way to resolve issues sooner. Roque denied that the government was using its COVID-19 response as propaganda, stressing that it was simply using data obtained from the World Health Organization to report on the country's global ranking. Take a look.
Oo nga pala, Madam Vice President, sasagutin ko kayo sa sinabi ninyo na dapat itigil ang propaganda and focus on fixing the pandemic response. Ma'am, hindi po propaganda ang World Health Association, ang organization. Baka magalit ang World Health Organization dahil sinasabi nyo, nagpapakalat ng propaganda. Hindi po. World Health Organization po nagsabi kung nasa na tayo sa ating COVID response. At ito pong katotohanan. Bakit namin paniniwalaan ang ibang pag-aaral? Samantalang lahat tayo nagtitiwala sa World Health Organization sa panahon ng pandemya. Hindi po propaganda yan. Katotohanan. Buksan ng mata, buksan ng tenga. Ano ba ho sabi ng World Health Organization? Number 32 po ang Pilipinas pagdating sa number ng mga total cases ng COVID. Number 45 po tayo pagdating sa active cases. At yung ating COVID-19 cases per 1 million population, nasa 134 po tayo, laylayan. At sa case fatality rate, number 72 ang Pilipinas. Hindi po yan propaganda. Katotohanan na dapat tanggapin at pasalamatan po lahat ng ating mga medical frontliners na talaga namang pong ginagawa ang lahat para pangalagaan ang kalusugan ng mga Pilipino. It is unfair to refer to their work output as propaganda. Wag naman po. Meron po tayong 27,318 na mga aktibong kaso ayon sa January 31, 2021 datos ng DOH. Sa mga aktibong mga kaso, 93.2% ay mild at asymptomatic. Nasa 3.3% ang critical at 2.8% ang severe. Nasa 487,551 ang kabuuan bilang namang gumagaling or 92.8% recovery rate. Samantalang malungkot nating binabalita na nasa 10,749 ang binuwi ng buhay dahil sa coronavirus. Nakikiramay po kami. Nasa 2.05% ang ating fatality rate.
Meanwhile, the Philippine Embassy in Tripoli on Tuesday advised Filipinos in Libya to continue taking necessary precautions to protect themselves against the coronavirus disease as cases of Filipinos afflicted with the disease climbed to 128 in the past 6 months, with at least 6 deaths reported. According to the Philippine News Agency, on February 1, 2 Filipino oil workers tested positive for COVID-19 in addition to the 23 cases reported last month alone. There are 15 Filipinos undergoing treatment for COVID-19 in the North African country. Embassy Chargé d'Affaires Head of Mission El Mercato said, quote, "Our kababayan should continue to exercise the necessary precautions, as more of them could get infected due to the continuing surge in the number of COVID-19 cases in Libya." Citing figures from the National Center for Disease Control, or NCDC, Cato said the number of COVID-19 cases recorded in Libya since March last year has reached 119,402. He said, quote, "Filipino nurses and other hospital workers are most vulnerable because they're right there in the front line serving alongside Libyan doctors and nurses." Of the 128 confirmed Filipino COVID cases, Mr. Cato said 102 are nurses and other hospital workers in Tripoli, Benghazi, Misrata, and other places in Libya. The rest are oil workers, office staff, and dependents. Mr. Cato said the 6 Filipino COVID-19 deaths were 2 hospital workers, 2 dependents of hospital workers, an oil worker, and a college instructor. 2 have been buried in Libya, while the remains of the other 4 are to be repatriated upon the request of their family members. The embassy has been distributing face shields, face masks, and gloves to the Filipino community. It has also provided food assistance from the International Organization for Migration, as well as medicines, vitamins, and other necessities for Filipinos who tested positive for the disease from donated funds, which are also being used to cover the cost of COVID-19 screening and other tests for infected Filipinos.
Vietnam confirmed 33 new COVID-19 cases on Monday, raising the national tally to 1,850. The latest patients include 1 imported case and 32 local infections in 6 localities, 17 in Haizong, 6 in Hanoi, 5 in Quang Ninh, 2 in Zalai, 1 in Bac Giang, and 1 in Binh Duong. The imported case is a South African man who flew from the United Arab Emirates to Ho Chi Minh City on January 17. He is being treated at the city's Cu Chi Field Hospital. The same day, 3 patients were declared free of the virus, taking the total recoveries to 1,460. Earlier the same day, the Ministry of Health called on citizens to cooperate with the government in order to help quickly suppress the third wave of COVID-19. All citizens were urged to heighten their sense of responsibility to protect the health of themselves and their families. Local authorities of 17 provinces and cities have decided to close schools in a bid to prevent spread of the virus.
Meanwhile, Malaysia's trade is expected to recover in 2021, backed by a recovery in global demand, especially for agricultural and manufactured goods, as COVID threats recede following a massive global vaccination program. In its economic update today, Public Investment Bank BHD or PIVB said there would also be sustained global demand for information technology products amid a pandemic condition that increased demand for devices such as computers and tablets for home-based work and learning. It also said a global 5G network transition by 2035 may in turn underpin a surge in demand for 5G-enabled products. However, PIVB said trade may continue to be weighed down by the steep output cut by the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries, or OPEC, and its oil-producing allies, OPEC Plus, until at least the second quarter of this year, and economic challenges in advanced and major economies due to COVID-19 headwinds, especially in the first half of this year. Other possible hampering factors are a resurgence in new domestic COVID cases that may push consumers to remain cautious and continue preserving capital, as well as the uncertainty caused by the U.S.-China second trade negotiations, which could begin as early as this quarter. The ASEAN Committee on Consumer Protection launched its second and third regional information campaigns on misleading advertisement and consumer redress. The campaign highlights ACCP's commitment towards ensuring a high common level of empowerment for the consumer and protection in the region. Let's take a look.
Advertisements play an important role in our everyday lives. They inform us about products and services in the market and greatly influence our purchasing decisions. However, sometimes these advertisements may be inaccurate, exaggerated, or misleading. Some illustrations may not match the offered services, while some products may not possess the qualifications or benefits they claim to have. For example, for our health. Similarly, processed food products may not contain the ingredients listed on the label or have harmful substances. Other products may be advertised different from their actual size. And sometimes, the advertised prices may not include all fees. As consumers, we need to pay close attention to labels, reviews, charges, and condition before making a purchase. We have the right to accurate and clear information and can also demand more detailed explanation from the businesses. Businesses should provide descriptions that do not mislead consumers. They should correct misunderstandings or false information and provide proper compensation to consumers if needed. If businesses make false claims, consumers can report this to the Consumer Protection Agency or relevant authorities. They may be able to ask the business to take down or amend the advertisement and sanction the business if necessary. Information about the authorities in charge of consumer protection in ASEAN can be found on the website of the ASEAN Committee on Consumer Protection, or the ACCP. If businesses are trading fairly, consumers in ASEAN will be able to shop with ease and confidence.
And here's the campaign of consumer redress. The campaign is launched in an effort to increase consumer awareness on product advertisements, which may be misleading or deceptive.
Institutions. As consumers, we have the right to complain and seek compensation when we experience harm or loss. This could be caused by goods and services that do not fulfill certain quality standards or expectations. For example, some goods and services may not match their description or are otherwise not satisfactory in quality. When this happens, consumers can get redress by filing a complaint and asking for a refund or some other form of compensation from the business. First, consumers can contact the business, who should have a customer service or help desk to deal with complaints. If the complaint cannot be resolved, they can consult with the consumer protection agencies or associations for guidance on who to approach. There are different institutions that can help settle consumer complaints, which can be reached both online and offline. These include sectoral authorities or regulators and alternative dispute resolution bodies. These institutions can assist in mediating the dispute or discipline the business if consumer protection laws have been breached. As a last resort, the consumers may bring their case to the court. For this, they may need support from a legal professional or entity. Information about authorities in charge of consumer protection in ASEAN can be found on the website of the ASEAN Committee on Consumer Protection, or the ACCP. Effective mechanisms for dispute resolution safeguard the interests and rights of consumers in ASEAN. This way, they can benefit from better and safer goods and services.
As always, thank you, Charlene, for joining me today here on ASEAN in Focus.
Of course. Thank you also, Alma, and to everyone who watched today, especially to Dalan Murada, Krisha Lim, and Janine Partido. So this is Charlene Navaja. We live in interesting times.
We'll see you back tomorrow here on ASEAN in Focus. I'm Alma Angeles, and we'll live in interesting times.